Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a trip way back to 1978. We're going to look at how this one, unassuming 20-page D&D module, Shrine of the Kuo-Toa, didn't just give players a hard time, it completely changed how adventures were designed, forever.
So before 1978, Dungeons & Dragons adventures, well, they could feel kind of like a random grab bag of challenges. You know, they were a blast to play, but they didn't always make a whole lot of sense. But then, this one module comes along and just flips the script. So, what on earth happened?
To really get just how big of a deal this was, we got to go back and understand the old way of doing things. The era of what we now call the Funhouse Dungeon.
Yeah, think of those early dungeons as these massive, crazy obstacle courses. They were specifically built to test the players, not to be a believable place. You might literally find a vampire's tomb right next door to a dragon's lair with absolutely no rhyme or reason for it. I mean, they were brilliant puzzles for sure, but they didn't really have a soul.
But then, in the summer of '78, at the Gen Con XI gaming convention, D&D's co-creator, the one and only Gary Gygax, he just drops this new philosophy of adventure design that was about to change everything.
And this was it. This little 20-page booklet with that iconic green cover. This was the catalyst for the whole revolution. What was inside these pages was going to rewrite the very DNA of how you build an adventure. Gygax's new idea, something we now call Gygaxian Naturalism, was actually pretty simple, but it was so profound. The world, the dungeon, the monsters, they should all exist on their own, whether the players are there or not. All of a sudden, you weren't the center of the universe anymore. You were just an explorer in a world that was ancient and alive long before you ever showed up.
So how did Gygax pull this off? How did he bring this new philosophy to life? Well, for starters, he didn't just build another dungeon. No, he created an entire underworld.
Right from the jump, as soon as players started their descent, they were hit with these sensory details that made the world feel totally real and totally alien. This wasn't just a dungeon, you know. It was this bizarre underground world that smelled like some deep, dark, forgotten ocean.
And you can just forget about torches or casting a light spell. This world had its own creepy illumination. It was coming from strange lichens and these glowing, fist-sized slugs. It just hammered home how incredibly different this place was.
Here, the environment itself was an enemy. This wasn't just about walking down corridors anymore. This was about surviving a hostile wilderness. Just try to picture it. You're crossing this dangerous underground river on a ferry, and the guy steering it is completely insane. And oh, by the way, there's a giant killer fish monster lurking right under the surface. This wasn't a simple puzzle. This was a fight for your life. And the things living down in this underworld? Well, they were just as complex and dangerous as the place itself. These were not just another room full of monsters waiting for you to kick in the door. You see, the Kuo-Toa weren't just some mindless fish people. They were an ancient race with a whole history, a fanatical religion, and this deep, burning hatred for the surface world. They had a reason to be hostile. This was a real, functioning society. They had social structures, religious rituals, they even had nurseries for their kids. They were here long before you arrived, and let's be honest, they were probably going to be there long after you were gone.
And because the Kuo-Toa were this intelligent, organized society, they fought like one. This forced players to completely ditch their old hack-and-slash habits and actually start thinking.
Yeah, just charging in blindly, that was a death sentence. This whole module was basically designed to punish brute force. If your party just tried to murder hobo their way through, they were probably going to meet a very quick, very brutal end.
Gygax actually designed the Kuo-Toa with these specific game mechanics meant to just break the standard player tactics. Imagine your big, tough fighter. His powerful magic sword literally gets stuffed to some fishman's shield. Or a whole group of their low-level priests chanting together to blast you with a massive lightning bolt. These weren't just monsters. They were tactical nightmares.
And hey, you want the ultimate proof of this new design philosophy in action? When they ran this module as the official D&D tournament at Gen Con, the winning strategy wasn't to fight. Nope, teams got points for surviving, for accurately mapping the twisted terrain, and for gathering intel on the Kuo-Toa and their mysterious neighbors, the Drow. In this new kind of world, brains were way more valuable than brawn.
So, what's the lasting impact of this little green module? It is absolutely no exaggeration to say that it changed the DNA of Dungeons & Dragons itself.
First, it gave us the Underdark, this massive, sprawling world beneath the world that's now a total staple of D&D. Second, it taught a whole generation of dungeon masters how to build living, breathing societies, not just monster stat blocks. And third, it proved that the best, most memorable adventures aren't always about combat. They're about survival, and they're about being smart.
And for you collectors out there, the module itself is like this amazing piece of history. If you look really close at these early printings, you can actually watch the story of a tiny company just skyrocketing to success. You've got the first printing from Gen Con, then the second one adds that tournament starburst, the third gets its first ISBN number. Each tiny little change tells the story of a game and a company that was about to become an absolute giant.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating question, right? This adventure series introduced us to two legendary underground races, the Kuo-Toa and the Drow. You know, the Dark Elves. But while the Drow went on to become these huge fantasy superstars, the Kuo-Toa kind of stayed in the background as this weird Lovecraftian horror. So why is that? Why did one become a household name and the other a footnote? You know, maybe some monsters are just scarier when they stay in the shadows.